The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good day, everyone. This is Tom Rieger. I'd like to welcome you to our webcast this morning titled Digital Process Transformation, How Cloud Content Management Brings a New Normal to Help Drive a Better Customer Experience. My name is Tom Rieger, the Masters of Ceremony, and we have a host of really great presenters on the phone today to give their perspective on what's going on. So how about we go ahead and get this started? So firstly, for anyone who has a question, please enter it in the question portion of the GoToWebinar tool that should be on your desktop there as you're watching this with us today. You can ask them at any time, and I have to ask this because one never knows what network, firewall, or telephone problem someone may have. If you happen to see this slide and you don't hear me, please let me know. So I wanted to make sure that we were all starting off on the right foot. Today's speakers. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Lane Severson with Doculabs, who's with us. He will be discussing the overall state of the market when it comes to content management. And Lane brings to us a long history in content management, and Doculabs as an organization has been around doing this for 20 years. So very excited to have Doculabs on the phone with us. Secondly, we have Andrew Marsh with Box, who manages the systems engineer out of his office in Colorado, and he brings over 20 years of content experience to the table, where he worked at Icon, Mobius, and most recently at EMC Documentum, where he worked with some of the largest and most trying of clients around the world. Finally, as the founder of Neocol, Ryan Lott has spent the last 15 years focused within the IBM ECM ecosystem of technologies, within some of their largest clients in the world, to architect, implement, deploy, maintain, and upgrade that which is FileNet, CM8, and the CMOD stacks, along with the peripheral technologies to make them work. I mentioned some of the experiences on this call because everyone involved comes and understands the trials and errors of on-premise content management use cases and are excited to show the art of the possible to reduce the scary characteristics as we look to make things happen better, faster, more nimbly, and offering the ease and elasticity of that which we call cloud computing. So without further ado, I'd like to hand the reins off to Lane Severson.
All right, fantastic. Well, welcome everybody again. My name is Lane Severson. I'm a practice leader here with Doculabs. And thanks to Tom for the great introduction there. The one analogy I would use for where each of us fit in the world before we get started is, if you think about Doculabs being, we are a strategic advisor to clients around their content management technologies, the people that are involved in deploying those technologies, and the processes that those technologies help to automate. You could think of us as a city planner. And if you think about Neocol with their implementation expertise, their design and architecture expertise, you might think of them as an architect building out the actual buildings in the city. And finally, I would characterize our friends at Box as being collaborators in both of those places, but in the examples we'll use today, really the source of material that we're using to build out these systems and technology capabilities. And so with that, I'm going to dive into an overview of the marketplace as it stands today, clarify some definitions around what digital transformation is and why those drivers are changing the way that we think about content management and its capabilities. And then I'll close with some thoughts around the current marketplace providers and new faces on the scenes. So Tom, if we can scroll forward a slide. I like this quote from Greg Carmichael to kick things off. CEO of Fifth Third Bank. He really captures the challenge that a lot of organizations are having around content management specifically. It's this idea that we're no longer just competing with folks in our own industry for the type of experience that a client has. Take perhaps a client onboarding process. We're not just competing between Fifth Third Bank, JPM Chase, Bank of America, and others, but we're actually competing with the ease of onboarding that you would have from anything from an Uber to an Amazon to a Dollar Shave Club experience, which is something you can do on your mobile phone, on the website, very easy and transparent. And those consumers that are out there are no longer differentiating between the fact that one of these is a very unregulated process and can be done very quickly because all I'm doing is obtaining razors, and another is setting up a brokerage account. A lot of folks are looking at this and wanting a similarly transparent and easy process to be able to interact with the organizations that they need to interact with. And so this is a fantastic setup for the overall context of what we're dealing with here. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk through two major topics. The first one here, the digital transformation of content management and the drivers around that, and then we'll talk a little bit about the providers. So if we can go to the slide on that, we can move forward again. Okay, the digital transformation of ECM. Why is this happening? Part of it is what we saw in that quote before, that clients and even our own employees are expecting an easier to use technology set that provides transparency, that actually allows us to work better, quicker, smarter, and to get our jobs done well. But another part of it comes from the tradition of ECM projects as monolithic entities that have attempted to meet every content management need in an organization with a very small tool set. And a tool set that I would argue has been geared towards primarily archiving the content objects and providing regulatory compliance around those objects. So we've seen over the past 20 years, the first 20 years of content management in the industry, a really heavy push towards managing the documents appropriately. And this has driven, I think, a really a lack of success because most folks have not seen that ultimate information governance or ultimate records management capability throughout their organization. And as they've been attempting to build that capability, it's reduced their the ability to provide a great experience for the internal customers, the employees who are working with these technologies, as well as our external clients. And so organizational mandates for content and how we manage content and what we want to get out of that management have changed. We're seeing a shift now from this focus on regulatory and records management to a focus on the client. And whether that's an internal client that is doing the work or an external client who is attempting to interact with our organization, we need to make that work process better, faster, more efficient. And so I will talk a little bit more about this in a slide afterwards. But another piece of this is that there are greenfield accounts, there are greenfield organizations out there. If you think about new banking solutions or robo-advisors or, others that are app-based banks today that don't have legacy infrastructure to deal with, they are really spinning up very smart, sophisticated, interactive experiences around a process like account onboarding, where legacy environments have a lot of weight to pull, whether it's from reorganizing their processes, rejiggering old technologies, getting their compliance folks on board. And so we see a little bit of a speed to market challenge where folks that don't have the old infrastructure are able to get ahead very quickly, and folks that do have old infrastructure are attempting to integrate that into a new strategy. And one of the challenges will be, how do we as legacy accounts that have a lot of investment in traditional ECM move our delivery of new services and products more quickly to market? Lastly, I think to enable this, we're going to see a shift in the marketplace towards more agile sprint-based delivery of services, microservices that are already packaged up into specific uses that we can then bundle together to create solutions in months and not years. Next slide, Tom. A quick view of the change of strategic goals that has gone on. I believe that the driving goal for organizations today is the security of client data, and so we see a lot of work going on to ensure that that client data is being protected from the moment that it's captured by an organization all the way through its life cycle. Cost and process efficiency is always a top priority for organizations, but then closely linked to that, and I would say directly linked to it, is customer experience there, and the focus on providing a delightful customer experience through the capabilities that we're delivering. And lastly, and this is the final thing I'll say about the records management piece, it's not that regulatory compliance and records management have gone away in any sense, but that I think we're realizing that there is a happy medium between meeting the spirit of the law without driving ourselves out of business and delivering a poor product to our clients, and that is being realigned in our priorities as we go through the distribution of these services. Next slide, please. So brief history of the ECM evolution. ECM really came out of this need that organizations had, right, to digitize paper and to be able to manage that in a digital format. And then as we stepped forward from there, we realized if we captured these pieces of content earlier in the business process, we would be able to actually use the content objects to onboard a client, for example, again. And so we began moving those around with workflow. We stuck that on top of the content management archives. And there was a lot of optimism, I think, in the early days that we would drive out paper from the enterprise and that we would move to a completely digital experience in this framework. But that has proven to not be the case. And if we look at the next step in this evolution, we start thinking about really true digital transformation. And Tom, if you can move ahead there one slide. In digital transformation, what we're doing is reimagining a process that has been driven in the past by physical documents and manual steps and has naturally evolved from that to just digitize the paper document and to automate the manual piece, but hasn't reimagined the entire process to say, what if we were just capturing the data up front and persisting the data all the way through and not moving a document, but merely producing a document on demand when we needed to at different points in that content process, and finally memorializing at the end for regulatory needs. The best example of this that everybody on the phone would know is obviously TurboTax, where I can fill out all of my tax documentation and never actually, as the end user, see a tax document from the government. And we can all say hallelujah for that. But what happens there is that I'm being led through a guided experience, and the actual content object itself is only produced on the back end for regulatory needs. This is the end state that most of us are looking for, but it requires that we take a step back from the processes and the technologies we're entrenched in and reimagine those from the ground up. Next slide, please. Okay, let's go through the provider space very quickly here, and then I'll hand it off to Andrew. If you think about the vendor landscape, I'm calling it, at the end of the 90s, we had a pretty robust set of tools and solutions that were being released to the industry, and over the course of the past several years, this has dwindled significantly. So we can move on here and see the transition to 2016. A majority of these folks have been acquired or gone the way of the dinosaur, and we're left with some of the major players that we all know, IBM, OpenText, Microsoft, and a few others that were not on the 99 slide. Let's go on to the next slide here for a few thoughts on those providers. The Documentum install base has asked a lot of questions recently about the scope and the goals for OpenText around Documentum, and only time will tell, but we are paid to prognosticate and to come up with our best guesses. Based on the acquisition of Documentum by OpenText, we think that there will be investment in continuing to provide that product and service, but we won't see the type of innovation and new capabilities that organizations are looking for to move forward into a digital transformation experience. Similarly with IBM, if you look at the earnings reports and you talk to folks at IBM today, a lot of the effort and investment and push is going towards, obviously, the Watson stack, and the analytics are around that. I think there's a lot of power to these capabilities, but IBM itself has not been investing in and promoting a microservices modular approach to delivering really content services throughout the organization. And so that leaves us a little bit with some of the rest. Alfresco has been moving in and grabbing hold of some of the Documentum install base that is concerned about the acquisition, and there is a little bit of movement around that. We also have folks like Highland, M-Files, Viva, and Everstream that are moving into or have always been in the cloud environment and are focused around a cloud-first document management solution. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention for some of our friends on the call that Spring CM is also in this mix here of providing a cloud-first content management capability. Let's go on to the next slide. There are, though, in addition to this, a host of cloud-first digital capabilities, everything from capture to e-signature to process orchestration, and we can start to imagine for an organization that has not had a heavy investment in legacy content management, the possibility of never getting into it in the first place and using only cloud-based tools. And we're actually going to see an example of that later in the presentation here. Next slide, Tom. But for a majority of Doculabs clients, and I think the majority of the folks that are on the phone here, the reality will be a hybrid approach where we need to figure out what processes and capabilities do we keep behind the firewall in our legacy systems that we've invested a lot in, so our line of business systems, the FileNets and OpenText of the world, and then how do we surround and augment those capabilities in a way that gives us more speed to market and faster deployment models by using some of these cloud-first providers that we showed in the previous slide. Next slide, please, Tom. We're coming around the bend here, folks. Doculabs has done a little bit of research over the past year with our client base, and I will tell you that this particular research came from one of the more conservative parts of the marketplace, financial services, insurance, and banking, and their thoughts around cloud content management. And what we found, this was interesting, is that the reluctance to move content management capabilities to the cloud was not for security of the data, and it was not because of a lack of being able to perform the regulatory duties that those institutions need around their documents, records management, information governance, and compliance concerns, but was more around the cost of migrating their current environments to a cloud-first player. And so this is interesting. It kind of untells a story that's been told in the marketplace for a while, and is definitely a turning point for some of these very conservative organizations. And then the last slide I'm going to share with you folks today is an overview of where organizations are at in their adoption of cloud-based solutions. And we see SaaS solutions have very quickly gained traction across the marketplace. Folks like Salesforce and Box, we see an adoption rate in the 90% range of clients that were interviewed. Office 365, obviously, with SharePoint is on the rise, and if you're talking to somebody that's not going through an Office 365 migration, let me know. Everyone we're talking to today is attempting to figure out where this fits in their framework, but that will soon, I believe, rise up to the levels that Salesforce and Box and others are at today. And then finally, we see trailing here, and really much more on the research end of the spectrum, real like classic ECM in the cloud. I think that we are going to see this lever rise too, but not around this will be an infrastructure play to free up internal capabilities as organizations realize that they don't need to be experts in standing up that technology and maintaining the systems, but that they can focus their efforts on actually providing solutions. And so we will see this grow more, but I don't think at the rate of some of these other solutions. And I know that Andrew Marsh is the next person on the line here that we're speaking with. And Andrew, I'm really interested in Box's perspective on, the play that you guys have in the marketplace as a very large and well-recognized brand today, and where you fit with Microsoft and a seemingly competitive set of technologies around OneDrive and SharePoint with your own offering. So I'll offer that over to you. Any thoughts?
It's an interesting question, and actually it's one of the most common questions I get whenever I'm presenting to a customer is, why do I need Box? I already have Microsoft OneDrive or SharePoint or one of the other technologies from Microsoft. And so I'll start by just pointing out that the partnership between Microsoft and Box is big and ever expanding. And as of November this year, you'll be able to deploy Box on Microsoft Azure and leverage some of the capabilities that are coming out from Microsoft, like some of their AI capabilities for auto recognition of content and that sort of thing. So starting November of this year, you'll start seeing Microsoft reps selling Box seats as well. So the fundamental difference really between the way Box thinks about content and the way Microsoft thinks about content are slightly different. And Box thinks about all content in one place, whereas Microsoft, again, jump to the next slide, if you will, Tom, please. Microsoft really has a more fragmented strategy about how people manage their content. And if you look at, the ask for me today was, understanding the drivers for moving into the cloud. And if you look at essentially what Lane was saying and take a different perspective on it, the strategies that companies have taken, the strategy might be a stretch in this scenario, over the last 25 years to manage their content has kind of evolved, right? So over on the left-hand side, you've got your classic file shares and network file shares, and then that need for additional compliance came in, and that's where the Documentum's OpenText of the world popped up and started providing those capabilities. But back to Lane's point, the adoption for those solutions, while they provided great object taxonomy and really tight controls over the content, the adoption rates were horrific on those. And coming from 15 years in the content space before I started at Box, I can attest to the challenges that we had with getting our users to adopt them. So as a result of that, companies like Dropbox, Google Drive, and actually Box sprouted up over 10 years ago to help provide access to that content. And in fact, Box really created that really vertical bucket of how to access that content. So if you look at this as a broader picture, you'll see that, jump to the next slide for me, Tom. You'll see that what people end up with most of the time today is a content strategy that looks something like this, whereby you have actually content stored in multiple silos in multiple locations, both on-prem and off-prem, around your entire organization. So this is generally something that resonates with virtually every customer that I've visited, and I think personally that's just simply because, again, back to the term I used before, using the terms content and strategy together is a bit of an oxymoron because people just look for an easy way to solve a particular problem. If you jump to the next slide for me there, please, Tom. So as a result of that strategy evolving in such a way, the requirement in the market for people to provide seamless and more effective and more efficient access and ways to communicate and collaborate with one another, these solutions have popped up to solve these problems. And so people have started adopting these solutions as individuals, using a term that we call shadow IT, where people have just adopted strategies to share content. And as a result, that's caused a lot of problems for IT organizations. And this isn't necessarily by any malintent on behalf of anybody that's trying to, that's using these tools. This is just simply a function of them trying to get additional work done. So, you know, 3/4 of the employees think it's acceptable to move confidential documents to personal devices. And again, as a Documentum sales engineer for 15 years, I remembered the way that I used to share content was download it from my Documentum system to my hard drive, attach it to an email, and send it off to a customer. So I've just created 3 versions of that particular piece of content, and so I was a victim of the solution that I was trying to sell to my customers. Go ahead, please, Tom. So again, the concept for Box is really fundamentally to turn that strategy on its head and provide a single persistent location for all your content, and make sure that you provide very simple, secure access to that content, regardless of whether you're on-prem or off-prem, or whether you're an employee of the organization or outside, internal to the organization or outside the organization. As long as you can secure that content, secure and provide capable access to that content to the people who need it, why not provide a single solution to handle all that content? Go ahead, please, Tom. And really, that's what Box is designed to do. You know, we sprouted up out of the enterprise file sync and share, but we were always, since we began, have always had an eye on the enterprise, or a focus on the enterprise. And what I mean by that is make sure that we can not only provide simple access to the content to anybody that needs it, but also provide the governance and controls and compliance components around the periphery of that content, so that the people who need access to it are authenticated and proper users, that they should have access to the content when they need it, and they don't have access to it when they can't. And then on the perimeter of that bubble, you really see really a set of APIs, because at the end of the day, that integration that we provide should be seamless, so that you don't actually have to use the Box user experience to access content within Box. And I think we're going to show a demonstration. Ryan here is in a minute. Go ahead, Tom. That's fine. We're going to show a demonstration here in a minute that highlights Box. In fact, Neocol is going to show the demonstration that highlights Box being used, and you wouldn't otherwise recognize that Box is being used in the entire demonstration, except that we're going to point it out a couple of times. And at the end of the day, a content strategy where the content doesn't become how do I get access to it, but how did I had no idea the content was in that repository, is a way more effective strategy. And the speed and time to deploy has a huge impact on the adoption rates of our customers. So again, if you look at the journey that we've been on over the last, we're a fairly young company, 11 or 12 years old at this point. At this point in our maturity for Box, we can provide the tools that you need, regardless of whether they're associated with productivity and collaboration, intelligent business process, or an engaging digital experience. And we can do it using the Box user experience, or in a way that your users and your environment never has to know that they're using Box. And I think I'll pass it over to Ryan next, and he can talk about exactly one scenario of how we do that.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. That was very insightful. I really appreciate you setting the tone here for us here at Neocol. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tom Rieger. I work here running strategy for the organization as someone who's been around content management a long time and IT for even longer. And I want to start by sharing, again, without the logos on it, this reference architecture that we bring to bear, because we're at this point in IT with cloud computing where best in breed is the word of the day again. If we think about 20 plus years ago when the world was moving into open systems, you had all of these different capabilities that really did something well, and you brought them together to solve a problem. And then through that time, especially in content management, it turned into much like Lane's slide, where you had a grand consolidation go on where you got whittled down to a few vendors who brought most of this into an opportunity. In the world of cloud, we're kind of that which is old is new again. And we bring forth the need to architect together these different capabilities to bring forth a solution to the market that solves a problem. But the value that is brought by this is an opportunity to quickly prototype, to quickly go from what we call idea to live, and how you can have the elasticity of the cloud really bring this forward. But we do this, again, from having a history around doing it on-premise. Neocol as a company is doing this for over 15 years, specifically around the IBM ecosystem of technologies, and we've been working through from the birth of the content all the way through the governance, risk, and the final disposition, so that total life cycle. And we've been doing this for a lot of clients over the years. But very quickly, let's get to the demo. So what we put together here at Neocol is a demonstration around customer onboarding. And in the airline freight industry, you contend with something that is very expensive. In fact, to ship a box on any airline or cargo carrier in the world for air freight starts at $200 a package and generally runs anywhere between $10 and $20 a pound on top of that initial cost. It's also highly, highly competitive, both from the people that we would sit on the top half of the plane going somewhere in, and otherwise those pure freight carriers. But if anyone was looking at the news last week, you will have also read where in the United States, the Transportation Security Administration is reviewing and adjusting how they want to manage the security of cargo being moved from point A to point B because of the potential of risk. So you deal with a regulated industry that is having a government dynamic of becoming more regulated. So within this, let's go right to the customer onboarding scenario. So before I hand this off to Ryan, let me quickly tell what's going to happen in the demonstration. So I have a customer here, and the customer is going to fill out an e-form online. From this e-form online they fill out, I then have someone within my airline who is an onboarding representative who will confirm the information and changes the status for review. The client then receives a text message, all the while making sure they know what is happening with their client onboarding experience with the airline. I have someone further back in the airline who is a caseworker who then obtains both the financial approval for them to become a customer along with the security approval. Someone from the TSA has to evaluate that they are a shipper who is known as a known shipper because of security concerns around the shipping of air cargo. Finally, upon that approval, the customer will receive an email which they will digitally sign. Once they digitally sign it, they receive an email welcoming them to their online portal to do, which is what they intended in the first place, which is to ship packages with my airline. Now, all the while, what I just described was simple enough, but what has to happen behind the scenes is we brought together almost a dozen of these content services, from an e-form to generating communications, to integrating with a customer relationship management system, to having a cloud content management system to manage all the documents that are coming through this workflow, having the additional communications go out, whether it be by text or by email, e-signature, and then finally a portal. But most importantly, having that green bar across the bottom around business process orchestration. The act of having this nimble means to manage everyone through, or manage the work through the cycle. Now, within this demonstration, we have three fictional characters. We have Nicolette as the customer. We have Leah, the onboarding rep. And of course, who wouldn't be a caseworker if your name wasn't Casey? So as we transition here into the demonstration, it's worth noting that this demonstration is live. that there is no smoke and mirrors. This is all live stuff. That it took us all of one person working about 30 hours to create this from end to end. And actually, a good portion of that 30 hours was actually used in creating the content materials in the demonstration, not necessarily the technology. And then finally, within what we did, there was no cost or provisioning time with any of the components to make this happen for this demonstration. So that being said, I will hand it over to Ryan.
Fantastic. Hey guys, this is Lane. If I could interject just briefly, I would just say for the other folks on the call, I think the example you've outlaid here, although it's being framed around shipping, this is exactly what we see at the Doculabs side for client onboarding from anything from insurance, banking, other government services, etc. So this is a very germane example across industries.
Excellent. Thank you, Lane. I appreciate that. Just Brian here, just want to make sure if Lane or Tom, you can just confirm you can hear me and see my screen okay?
Yes, sir.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. So everyone, I'm Brian Lott. I'm the CEO and founder of Neocol. I'll be taking you through this demonstration today. So we have an organization here, Smarter Air Cargo. And in this scenario here, I'm logging in as Nicolette. And I would like to apply to ship some goods with Smarter Air Cargo. So on their website, there's an area where I can apply. This here is bringing up an e-form for the individual to complete. So I will quickly go ahead and complete this e-form while we're here. And just while I'm going through and completing this, just to kind of echo what Lane said there, that this onboarding process here that we're seeing is something that we've done for many years across different organizations, across multiple sectors. And for me, what's very exciting is we're now able to, rather than talking 6, 12, 18 months to get a solution, get the products in place and build out a solution, we're able to do this in a shorter period very quickly. As Tom mentioned, this was about 30 hours work to set up this demonstration. So it's great for prototyping and also building out live solutions in a flexible and nimble manner. So, okay, I have a form here that's been completed. I'm now going to go ahead and submit this form. A couple of tick boxes to say I agree, and I'll go ahead and submit the form. So now from the Smarter Air Cargo site, someone who wants to ship information across, I've now been able to come in here and complete this form. So what I'll do is I now have Leah here, a profile for Leah, who's using Salesforce as a system to manage new leads coming in. So if I go ahead and refresh, here we can see that there's a new lead that's come in here for Leah to deal with from Nicolette Smart. So at this stage, what we've done is we have mapped across the information that was completed on the electronic form into this lead here. And importantly, what we have under the Documents tab here is a PDF version of the form that was completed. And this is important in this particular scenario here and I think as Lane mentioned really, the documents and content are becoming artifacts. And we have a lot of the information in the lead record, but from an audit perspective, we have a copy here of the form that was completed. And in this scenario, the TSA will come back to organizations and ask to see completion of forms. So it's there from an audit perspective. We can have governance and management around this. So we're pulling this document here back seamlessly from Box, from the user. So at this stage, Leah decides that they want to do business with the organization, Neo Packaging and Nicolette Smart. So we're going to go ahead and convert this into an account using the standard Salesforce functionality. We create an account. And this is going to do a couple of things for us. So if I now look in my accounts tab, I have an account created for Neo Packaging. And you'll see that the status here is awaiting TSA approval. So if I'm to switch over to being Casey now, who, as Tom pointed out, is our case worker, and to refresh the queue here for Casey, we'll see that there's now been a case created. So Casey's role is really purely just coming in and reacting to these cases. So here, if we open this up, you'll notice straight away that the form here is being loaded up. It's coming directly from Box. So Casey can see all the information again that's been submitted. We have some further details, and we also have some case documents. So at this stage, if relating to this particular case, if there's some approval notifications or emails or comments or documents that Casey wants to source in this case, we can go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to click upload here and go ahead and upload a couple of documents here. So I can just drag and drop those into the case. You'll notice they're here. I can go ahead and upload those. Okay, so if I close this out, you can now see that within this particular case, we have a couple of documents. We have a certificate here from the TSA saying that they're happy for Neo Packaging to go ahead and send and ship cargo in the United States. There's another document here, which is a letter from the TSA as well. So these are artifacts relating to this specific case, which are being pulled back and stored within Box, specifically related to this case. And to show you what's interesting here, if I log in as Leah, again, go back to Leah. Leah can see that there's a case currently awaiting approval and click in here. But Leah is only able to see the application form. So any of the documents, etc., relating to the case, the security has been set up in a way that Leah is not able to pull back that content from Box. So if I just switch back over now to Casey, I just wanted to show that point. We can go ahead. Casey's spoken to the TSA and at this stage is going to approve the individual here to go ahead on this case. Okay, so we've gone ahead, approved that. So if I now log in as Leah and switch over to look at the accounts and bring up our Neo Packaging account, we can now see that the status of this account has changed into awaiting customer signature. So at this stage, we now have, if I log back in as a customer over here and log into my email, just refresh my email. Bear with me. Okay, so Microsoft has called up me here now. So I now have the email that's come in here, which is a contract awaiting signature. So I will click here to come and review this document. You'll see we're using DocuSign at this stage. I have a contract that's been created. It's taken the information from the Salesforce record, so information about the company, the address in here. We have all of this information. I can now go ahead down the bottom here and as Nicolette, go ahead and sign this document. So agree to the contract and click finish. Okay. So at this stage, we've gone through the onboarding process. We've had a new lead come in. We've checked with the TSA that they're happy for this company to ship cargo. We've then sent out a contract to the customer that's going to be signed. So they've now onboarded as a customer. So if we log back into our system of record here as Leah, and we come to our accounts, and we take the Neo Packaging, we can see the status has now changed to a confirmed customer. So we can go ahead and start doing business with this customer. So if we go into the customer record here, at this stage, we've actually sent a text message across to Nicolette to inform Nicolette that the company is now onboarded. We've also sent an email saying welcome to Smarter Air Cargo. At this stage, we have a link to go and set up a username and password to access the cargo portal. So if I set up password here, take us back to the Smarter Air Cargo site where we have a login option. We can now log in. Okay, so we've now logged into the portal as a user, and here we can do a number of things. We can go into the accounting section and view invoices that have been generated. We can go ahead and generate new shipping requests, and just simply here from a demonstration perspective to show you how, once again, we're pulling back all this information stored centrally within Box. Here, if the user wants to see a copy of their signed contract, they can come in and pull up that same version of the signed contract that was stored here in Box, which is the same document that if the rep was to log in here as Leah and I look at the document here, I can also see the same version of the signed contract. So we're storing content in the Box repository and pulling it back from multiple places here. Okay, so that wraps up the demonstration. Tom, if I can hand back to yourself to come back to the presentation. Perfect. Okay, so if we could just look at the, sorry, Tom, go on to the next slide here. Okay, as we mentioned, as Tom mentioned, we're using multiple different services here throughout. So we've highlighted the types of technology that we're using. So we had the client portal, we had a web form that Nicolette initially completed. We have the generation of the PDF document, which was the artifact. We had emails being sent out, we had text messages being sent to the customer, we had an electronic signature. All of this was being orchestrated by process orchestration, and throughout it we were storing and generating content in our cloud content management system, and the users were working out of a CRM and case management system as well. If you click next slide, please. So here you can see that to actually build out this solution, we have multiple services, so microservices, and I think, again, from my perspective, what is really interesting and exciting about where we are in the world now with technology compared to where we have been the last 15 years implementing these solutions as Neocol is we would have previously had to implement a large solution from the likes of an IBM case manager or Documentum system to look to try and meet all of these needs in that demonstration system that you've seen there. Whereas now everything is componentized, so we can say, okay, I want to add in text messaging. Actually, I want to send a text message at this particular stage in the process. We're talking literally going in within a couple of minutes, changing the business process to say, I want to send a text message actually when we kick off the process, or I want to send one at the end of the process. And you can add in and remove these components as needed. So say, for example, we actually have documentation coming in by email, fax, or paper throughout the process. If we need to add in a component such as Ethersoft to go and capture that information and pull that into the business process, we can quickly do that. So you can add and remove components quickly. And what we're seeing, our customers are really excited because they can be nimble and agile and pivot and make changes in their business within days and weeks, as opposed to spending 2 years implementing a system and then not wanting to change that system because it took you 2 years to get up and running. We're literally talking days to go in and make a business change. So, Tom, at this stage, wanted to hand back to yourself.
Appreciate that, Ryan. And that was one of those demonstrations that I think really shows the ability to bring, in some cases, those Lego pieces that exist on the web and bring them to clip them together and to solve a business problem very quickly. And again, I think the real magic here, secret to success, is how you can do this quickly and inexpensively, and your ability to go from idea to prototype to go live, you can measure with a stopwatch. So I'd like to kind of somewhat close it out for our presentation today by making sure that I share how you can contact any of us, both from a web and an email perspective. I would like to open up a poll real quick to also see from your perspective what your organization's comfort is with cloud computing at the moment. because as we've all been discussing, this idea of cloud has been around for some time. There have been reasons for organizations not to do it, either from a technology perspective, a risk perspective, or as Lane even called out, it's really just you're battling with that which is on-premise. To migrate to the cloud is no easier than to migrate to something different on-premise. Everyone has some degree of either optimism, engagement, or personally, you'll love it, around the cloud. Thank you for that information. I do want to call out before we close out the conversation that we, within Neocol, in working with Lane Severson, our presenter today, we're in the throes this week of completing a research effort around defining that which we have all called digital transformation. What is it? And let's put some parameters around it. And in fact, the question or the statement that Lane stated in his slides is actually our first question on the survey. And I thought I would share so far what I've received from 106 individuals so far when I did the screenshot around their perception of that question. Specifically, do you believe this is the case with your customers and what they expect of your organization? And I think the short answer is it's a very loud yes. And within the research and survey efforts, we plan on doing a resulting webinar on September 13th. And we'll be publishing a white paper through the month of September. And anyone on this webcast who would like to participate in this research effort, the bit.ly is at the bottom of the screen. You can also find it from neocol.com's website. So with that being said, I would like to open up the webinar to questions. You can enter questions in the question section of the GoToWebinar session, or you can chat your question to us as the paneler or organizers, and we can answer them from there. I do have a question that came up, and the question is around Ryan, when you were talking about security and what people could see from within that demonstration, was that controlled by Salesforce or was that controlled by Box?
Yeah, great question there, Tom. So I think actually over the years, from implementing these types of solutions, we had to rely heavily on the security within the repository and using that to drive who could see which documents. But in a demonstration there, what we're seeing when we're using Box under the covers and users aren't going into the Box interface, they're not logging into it, what we're seeing is actually the application itself controls the security. So there, we were in the case in Salesforce as one user, we could see the documents as another user, we couldn't, and it's actually Salesforce itself that is controlling that security. So the users themselves don't even know that Box is there behind the scenes. They're not logging into Box. If they were to log into Box in this scenario, we could have it so they couldn't see the documents. So the only way they could get to them is through that tab in Salesforce. Salesforce is controlling the security.
Great. All right, well, there are a few more questions that came in, but we are now near the top of the hour, and I felt compelled to respect your time. So we will take these questions and send a note to everyone who attended today the answer to these questions. I want to thank everyone for attending today, and I'd also like to thank Lane from Doculabs, Andrew from Box, and Ryan here with Neocol. Especially in what I think is a very compelling story around the opportunity to do new things using cloud content management and the applicable services. So that